Hey, I'm Pastor Tay, and welcome to this video series called Walk by the Spirit. And so, let's go for a walk. This is walk number 4 in the series, and it's an inspiration, or I was inspired by Galatians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16, where the opening phrase is, walk by the Spirit. And I believe these two verses really represent and talk about so many important things about the Christian life. And so I thought I'd do these little 5-minute video series and just explain to you just some of the critical dynamics of living the Christian life in the light of all the things that just make it so hard. Okay, internally and externally and so forth. And today is walk number 4. So just give me a second and just remind you that in walk number 1, I introduced the idea of walk by the Spirit. And what that means is that you live a life of obedience to the Holy Spirit of God. Okay? And then in the second walk, I talked about the sin nature. It says, well, actually, let me quote the verse 16, where it says, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. And so in the second video, I talked about what the sinful nature is, and we confirmed that it is the presence of sin, the power of sin, inside you even after you become a Christian. And that's why it is so hard. And then in the third video, I focused on the word desires. And we confirmed how sin is alive and actually growing inside you. In fact, living things have desires, right? Not dead things. And so that's what that video was about. And so today in walk number 4, I want to talk about the verb there, gratify. And so the verse again is, therefore walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. And so as you make a decision to live a life of obedience to the Holy Spirit of God, you are, I guess, making a decision not to gratify the desires of the sin that is inside you. And again, sin is something that is alive and has a desire or a craving. You remember in walk 3, I told you that the original word, the Greek word, was lust. And so this desire is a deep lust or a craving for everything that is wrong. And so it says, do not gratify that. What that means is do not feed that. And so let's think about that idea for a minute, because that's what this walk is about, not gratifying that desire. Okay, so sin is alive and sin is growing inside you, but you got to make a decision not to gratify that, not to feed that, not to fuel it. You know what I'm talking about? Well, let's try to keep it simple. It's like, have you ever had a craving? Of course you did. For certain foods, right? I mean, the cravings can become so intense. I mean, what's your favorite food? What are some foods like that you just gotta have? And so you think about it. It's almost like a desire, and it impacts everything that you do, right? Your schedule, you work your schedule around it, and you do everything in order to gratify that craving that you have. And so we all know what it's like in terms of food and hunger for that. But in this case, we're talking about the Christian life, and so we're talking about all kinds of potential cravings. Bad habits. Okay, I mean, whatever. The field is wide open for anything that you might want to do. And by the way, sin is fun. I know that sounds crazy, but why do you want to do that sin? It's because you find it enjoyable. So let's be honest and say that we're craving it because for whatever twisted reason, we kind of enjoy that sin. We, for that moment, find it pleasurable and enjoyable. And so we crave it. But again, the biblical principle or the command here is not to gratify it. Don't feed it, okay? Don't create an opportunity where that desire becomes even bigger. Okay, it's already alive, okay? It's already kind of bubbling up inside you. But if you decide to feed it, again, remember, it's alive. And if you feed something that is alive, it's going to get bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, it's going to dominate you. It's going to control you. And isn't that what happens when people get addicted to something? It can be a drug. It can be a certain lifestyle. It can be a certain bad habit in your life. And so this is what happens when you make a decision to feed the sinful desires that are developing inside you. So again, trying to keep it right now simple. I know it's actually very complicated. And you know what? In future walks, I'm going to talk about that complication. But right now, it's important you hear the simple message that you got to stop feeding that lust that is inside you. So what is that lust? What is that craving? What do you want so bad? Okay, you know it's wrong. We talked about that, right? Craving or lusting after things that are obviously wrong, but you still want it. Okay? Don't do it. Make the decision not to gratify that. What is it? Drugs, friendships, associations, okay, certain ways of doing things. I'm also going to add internal stuff like fear and anxiety, depression. Don't feed it. Okay? The thoughts come to you. Those feelings come to you. But you have to make a decision not to feed it, because that little fear can turn into a monster fear. It can turn into something that is out to get you. And it will. And in future walk videos, I'm going to explain to you just how bad it can get as it begins to devour you and take control over your life. But for now, let me say the verse again. So I say, verse 16, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. So that's the decision you got to make today, not to feed it, not to gratify it. In fact, do what the opening phrase says. Walk by the Spirit. Do that. Sense the urgency today to make the right decision, do the right thing, and not delay.
Thanks for joining us in a Walk by the Spirit. If you want to continue with us on our walk, click here to subscribe so you know when the next one is ready to enjoy. For counseling services, go to pastortay.com/counseling. And if you want to see where we have walked before, click here. See you next time. May God bless your day.